Dear friends, grace and peace from God our Father and from our crucified and risen Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. We had a marvelous list of things that we cherish. Those things of family and friends. Maybe we think of some other things, of the beauty of mountains and of lakes and the power and majesty of the ocean or the beauty of rainbows. In 1980, my parents came to visit New York, and my internship supervisor took us to the top of the World Trade Center. And it was beyond anything I had ever experienced, and certainly with 4 stories being the tallest building in my hometown, beyond anything that my parents had experienced. And on 9/11, when I was driving and I heard on the radio that planes had crashed into the World Trade Center, I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. And it wasn't until I saw that repeated on television when it actually happened that I came to realize that this actually happened. And shortly after that, hearing of plane going into and destroying a good fifth of the Pentagon building in Washington, and then a plane going down over Pennsylvania, hearing that all air traffic had been halted in the United States. These were things that not only me, but many people, I guess the whole country, maybe the world, were depending on. And they came crashing down. Today's readings are about the impermanence of the things of this world, the things of our own hands, the things of our own mind, and even of our lives. But these readings are also about the permanence of God entering the world with grace and mercy for all in Jesus Christ. And that is what we have to remember in the times of difficulty, like 9/11, or the many times of difficulty that we experience in our lives. As Jesus was standing before this glorious temple with these huge stones, the place where the people of Jerusalem, the people of Israel, believed that heaven and earth touched, that this is where God came and entered into this world, was through this building and these stones where these sacrifices were made. And Jesus says to them that all things will come to an end, the things of this world. The days will come when not one stone of this glorious temple, the most glorious building that anyone in the nation had ever seen, that not one of those stones will be left on top of one another. And that must have come as a horrible shock or an insult. It would be unbelievable to them. Then those who were listening asked Jesus a question. When? When is that going to happen? And Jesus says, you're asking the wrong question. The question is not when. We all jump to that in these times. When is this going to happen? Jesus says, many will claim to know the answer of when. Don't go after them. He continues to say, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes, there will be famines, there will be plagues. You know, and we have extended these things into airplanes and skyscrapers. These things will happen. Do not be terrified. Those things have happened in every generation of the world. This is not something new. Now, I have to admit that when I saw those pictures and when I finally came to believe that this actually happened, I was terrified. And then when it got close and they were talking about, is that plane destined for the White House or for the Pentagon, it got really close. And I was afraid. And I was starting to begin that this must be the end of everything. I fell for that. Now, this conversation took place, this conversation about end times and troubles, it took place there at the temple, which seemed to be permanent. But it also took place at the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. So now, as we speak of the temple, Jesus speaks of his body and of our bodies as the temple of God. And so, when we're speaking of the end of that which is what we think is permanent, even this body that God had given to Jesus, his human body, now in just a few days they would be coming to understand that that temple would be destroyed. While that made of stone may have lasted for another 30, 40 years before the Romans did come in and wipe that out, Jesus is speaking about the temple of his own body. It was they were living in the end times of that temple being destroyed. There they had a end time supper that sometimes we call the Last Supper. They would be where Peter would say 3 times, "Never heard of the guy, don't know a thing, don't blame me." There would be the ending of that relationship of love and trust that Peter would end. There would be that end prayer time in the Garden of Gethsemane when soldiers would come with torches and clubs and swords. There would be a last trial, a kangaroo court that would convict him. And he was then hanging from a cross with his very last breath, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And in that next phrase, "Into your hands I commend my spirit. Whatever happens to this earthly temple, I still trust God." The story of the end comes after his triumphal entry. That glorious day of Palm Sunday and his teachings. In that teaching, Jesus noticed a poor widow. And he lifted up her love, her stewardship, her giving as that which endures, her care and concern. Those who were concerned about time and place, those who were concerned about power and authority, were all consumed and saw her little offering as nothing. But Jesus saw the greatness of her love. They were shocked when Jesus talked about the temple being destroyed, and they were thinking that temple of stone, which ultimately was destroyed, but he was speaking of that which what he had been given would also be destroyed, and that it would be through faith and trust in God, where that would be resurrected, that would be restored. So being sidetracked about the end of time, Jesus faced this, we have all faced this. There were all over Europe at the year 1000. There were people thinking at the turn of this calendar that the whole world was going to come to an end, and people preaching this and people following it. Martin Luther was dealing with it and said, if I knew that the world was coming to an end tomorrow, I would plant my apple tree today. In 1844, there was a man in this country, Charles Miller, who decided that through his secret studies and great knowledge that nobody else had, that the world would come to an end on October 22nd, 1844. Charles Miller, the founder of what was then called the Millerites, the Seventh-day Adventists. And when that date came and went, well, surprise, we found new knowledge in the Bible, and it got postponed a few years. And so here we go. Remember Jesus. There will be many who come and say, I've got the answer to the things eternal. Do not follow them and do not listen to them. They will be quoting from Ezekiel and Daniel and Revelation, a little bit of Thessalonians, and a few chapters, this one included in the Bible here at the end of time. And people have used these things, and they have used it in order for political or financial or whatever reasons to attack the Pope or attack Hitler or attack Nazi Germany or say that the Soviet Union is the devil or China or the League of Nations in the First World War or the United Nations after the Second World War. There are still people claiming that this is just the most horrible thing. Jesus says, do not listen to them. The clearest way to recognize this distortion is, are they asking the question when, or are they asking the question that we should all be asking, who? They ignore the end of the cross that was God's statement once and for all for the world. Somebody asked me, when were you saved? And I said, when I was baptized. Somebody said, oh, well, you weren't even old enough. You didn't know what was going on. And I didn't seem to be getting anywhere. And in reading the scriptures, and I came to realize that when I was asked that question again, when were you saved? It was on the third Friday in April at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the year 33. That is when I was saved. That takes care of all the whens. The question for me is, who am I trusting? Who am I following? Because the when has been determined. And it was in Jesus on the cross. So when you hear about the end times, yes, I fear too when these terrible things happen. But these end times are not the result of that which will endure. These are the horrible things that we have, and all of our temples are ultimately destroyed. The promise of God comes to us in Jesus Christ, so that we can have, along with our fears, that faith and trust in God, that in Jesus Christ will make all things new and glorious.